Healthy soils are essential for achieving broader goals, such as net zero carbon emission, reversing biodiversity loss, and sustaining human health. But to fix our soils, we must first understand them. We need tools to identify quickly the land that is being degraded and needs our attention. Then policymakers can target those areas with policies to promote sustainable land management and farming practices. For this series, we are interviewing some of the leading scientists who are working to create these tools. They are part of the project funded by the European Union called AI for Soil Health. And as the name suggests, they are using artificial intelligence and a range of other cutting-edge innovation to lead the way towards understanding our soils. In this episode, we hear from Nima Shokri, professor at Hamburg University of Technology. Hi Nima, thank you so much for joining us today. To learn more about your work, we would like to ask a few questions. And the first one is, why is declining soil health such an important issue, not only for farmers, but also for the environment and a society as a whole?
Hi, I'm very happy to be here. Thank you for the invitation. So you're asking a very important question, the topic of soil health. I think you can't overstate the importance of the soil health. So when you talk about soil, people immediately think of food security, which is of course a very important matter. So every day, everyone is somehow dealing with soil. I assume you had breakfast or lunch or something. So the products that you're using is coming from the soil. And so therefore soil health matters. But the impact of soil health goes far beyond just the food production. When you look at a wide range of processes, hydrological processes, land-atmosphere interaction, somehow you're dealing with soil health. When you talk about water regulation, when you talk about nowadays everybody likes climate regulation, right? Everybody likes to talk about climate. So you can't have climate regulation if you don't have soil health. Carbon sequestration is a big deal nowadays, right? So let me give you an example, share some numbers with you. You can Google that, you can find the detailed information. But I guess the amount of the CO2 that is emitted annually is in the order of 40 billion tons. That's more or less the number, but might be a little bit less or more. But the order is 40 billion tons. And these CCS technologies, that is carbon capture and sequestration, they are talking about 40, 50 million tons. So they can capture and sequestrate about 40, 50 million tons, and the emission is 40 billion tons, like 3 orders of magnitude more. But let me tell you about how much carbon you have in the soil. The estimate suggests something in the order of 4 trillion tons. So let me repeat the numbers again. You have 40, 50 million tons CCS, that's carbon capture and sequestration. You have 40 billion tons emission, and the carbon in the soil that is stored in the soil, the estimate suggests 4 trillion tons. So imagine if the soil health is not preserved, if soil goes through degradation, right? And if this carbon is released, what's going to happen to the ecosystem and this equilibrium we have? It's not only that, but also some other topics. For example, when you think of, let's say, flood regulation, when you think of cultural heritage, when you think of social welfare, all of this topic, you're somehow dealing with soil health. And this is not a new information. So when you look at the ancient civilization, when you look at a lot of religious textbooks, they do talk about soil health. Thousands of years ago, they talk about that. And that's, I think it was Franklin Roosevelt, the US president in the 30s, when he mentioned that the nation that destroys its soil destroys itself. And that's recognizing the importance of the soil health.
And how can artificial intelligence then change the way we monitor and understand the condition of soils compared to traditional approaches?
So that could be from a wide range of different angles. For example, with artificial intelligence, you can develop models and some predictions, some quantifications for areas when we don't have data. That's just to begin with. So there is certainly a data inequality when it comes to soil health. So some areas you have lots of data, right? And some areas you just don't have data. And with artificial intelligence, we can bring information, knowledge, and predictions, quantifications to areas that are basically poor in terms of data availability. So with artificial intelligence, I believe we can close this gap. Also, on top of that, I think we can have nearly close to real-time quantification, measurement, analysis. And with the artificial intelligence, you can include or you can investigate the effects of many more parameters than traditional approaches. When you have, let's say, some sort of a process-based model or physically based model, which are extremely important, by the way, to help us to understand what's going on, to identify the right mechanisms. But a certain set of parameters you can include in those equations, because we don't have equations, for example, let's say how soil health influences the social welfare. We don't have that equation, right? But with AI, if you have right amount of data, if you have reliable data, we can integrate all these parameters in the description of our soil health and quantification.
AI is not just about understanding the current condition, it can also help us predict future changes. How can AI help us anticipate where soil might be at risk or how soil could recover?
Okay, I can give you an example of one of the work that we did recently where we use AI to predict the future of soil salinization globally. Okay, so how it works is in a very simple terminology. Let's say you have a parameter of interest that you're interested. Let's say that is soil salinity, right? Let's call this your target parameter. And then you say this target parameter is correlated with a wide range of other parameters. Let's call them predictors. So they could be climate related, they could be soil related parameters, they could be socioeconomic related parameters, and so on and so forth. Okay? So you have data, you have measured data of, let's say, soil salinity at the moment. You have this measured data. And then you go at each spot where you have this measured data to quantify, to find the values of these parameters that you listed. Then you will end up, depending on the number of the data you have, you may end up with a big matrix of data. You expose this data to an AI algorithm and force the algorithm to find a relationship, to build a model relating these target parameters to these predictors. And then you validate your model. That's another completely different job, but you do the validation and everything. When you're happy with the model, then you use this model to predict the soil salinity continuously. Okay? But imagine if some of these parameters change temporarily. For example, let's say if it is temperature, if it is precipitation, if it is radiation, I don't know, you just name it. If they change temporarily, and if you have predictions, the future predictions for these parameters, for example, for evapotranspiration we have, or for temperature we have, or for wind speed, for example, we have. If you have the future value of that, and some of the other parameters, it's okay kind of to assume they don't change temporarily. Let's say soil texture. Change a little bit, maybe a little bit of here and there, erosion and all that, but it's okay. You're safe to assume, okay, my soil texture doesn't change. So you will have some parameters that they change only spatially, and some other parameter that changes temporally and spatially. And if you have the future values for those temporal parameters, then you put that in your AI model, then you can predict the future scenarios. Of course, there's many more details involved.
Yeah, that's great. And how do you see artificial intelligence changing the way we care for and manage healthy soils in Europe and beyond? What do you see in the future?
That's a good question. So in 10 to 20 years, but don't come back to me 20 years from now and blame me, why did you say that? But I can imagine we will really have tailored, customized advisor for every farmer. That every farm, every region, they have their own data, own measurements. And I can imagine that there will be some sort of a, let's call it an AI agent going to farm and advising the people and the corresponding farmer, depending on the condition of their land. I can imagine that. AI can help you to identify hotspots. AI can help you, for example, if I tell you that particular region in Spain going to suffer from salinity under these scenarios, that information can help the policymakers to basically direct the right investment. So if I know that's going to happen, so you can come up with the remediation or mitigation strategies, right? So therefore, I can imagine AI can help to establish more how do you call it, the proactive approach rather than reactive approach, more climate and other environmental parameter adaptive approach rather than, let's say, climate vulnerable approach. So with AI, I think we will be more proactive. That's how I see it 20 years from now. But who knows? I don't know.
Thank you so much, Nima. Thank you so much for your work.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Thank you.
AI for Soil Health is funded by the European Union and has received funds from UK Research and Innovation under the UK government's Horizon Europe funding guarantee. For more information, visit aiforsoilhealth.eu. That is AI for as number soilhealth.eu.